Good evening, students. As usual, I'm your guide in research methodology or nursing research. After a week break or two, today we want to look at research hypothesis. Research hypothesis. Under research hypothesis, we'll look at the types of hypothesis. We'll look at, there are three types of hypothesis. We have research hypothesis, null hypothesis, and testable hypothesis. Then under each heading of the types, there are also subheadings. Then we'll look at the importance of research hypothesis. Then we'll look at sources of hypothesis. Then we'll look at some explanation about the subtypes. So to begin with, we'll look at what is hypothesis. Hypothesis is considered as an intelligent guess or a prediction that gives directional to the researcher to answer the research question. Hypothesis is considered as an intelligent guess or prediction that gives direction to the researcher to answer the research question. So in essence, hypothesis is a guess or an intelligent or prediction for the researcher to answer some of the research question. For example, you know your research problem. How do you come about that research problem? How do you intend to solve that research problem? So by making this prediction or by guessing, it will help you to simply go about solving such problem. So that is what hypothesis is all about. In another definition, hypothesis with SI or hypothesis, that's the plural with ES, are defined as the formal statement of the tentative or expected prediction or explanation of the relationship between two or more variables in a specified population. All you are trying to do in hypothesis, you are trying to know the relationship between two variables, between, for example, independent and dependent variables. So the formal or tentative prediction or guessing or expected result. For example, before you conduct result, you are trying to predict the outcome of your research. So what you are simply doing, you are simply doing hypothesis. The third definition is hypothesis is derived from research problem, literature review, and conceptual framework. If you have not forgotten, last week we defined what conceptual framework as a set of broad ideas and principles used to structure a subsequent presentation. So, and every research activity is conceptualized and will be carried out with some conceptual framework. You must have some concept, you must have some methodology, you must have some limit in which your research will be carried out. That is simply conceptual framework. So in this, the hypothesis is gotten or derived from research problem, from literature review, from conceptual framework. So these three form the basis for research hypothesis. So hypothesis in research project, in project or research project, logically follow literature review and conceptual framework. So once you get your research problem and your conceptual framework, then you should know that yes, your hypothesis is going to be excellent. We now go into importance of research hypothesis. We have 6 importance of research hypothesis. The first one is research hypothesis provide clarity to research objective. It provide clarity to research objective. You have your aim, you have your objectives, and those objectives must be smart. They must be measurable. They must be time bound. They must be all those things, like I mentioned in one of our lectures. So it will give you clarity. It will give you a guide on how clear you can achieve your set objective. Then the second one, it describes, explain, or predict the expected result or outcome of the research. So you can use research hypothesis to predict your expected result. Like I mentioned, for example, you want to know the effect of malaria drugs on children. So once you have your topic, you have your problem, why do you intend to go into that problem? Then from there, you'll be able to predict using hypothesis to know what are the likely outcome of your research. So research hypothesis will help you in explaining, describing, and predicting the expected result or outcome of the research. The third is it indicates the type of research design. You know, before you go into research, you have to design your research. How do you want to go about it? You have time frame in which you want to conduct your research. You have budget. These are some of the design. You have your statement of the problem. You have the target audience. Who are your research targeted towards? All this will help you in actualizing your research design. It's the fourth one. It's research hypothesis direct the research study process. It will give you direction. You don't need to be hanging. You don't need to start your project and abandon it. That is the problem we are facing today. You discover some people will go into research, but because of maybe improper design or lack of hypothesis, they abandon the research halfway because there is no direction. Whether that the timing is bad or the budget is not properly done or not well spelled out. So these are some of the issues. So a good research hypothesis must give you direction in which you carry or conduct your research. Then the fifth one is identify. Research hypothesis will help you to identify the population of the research study that is to be investigated or examined. So it will clearly show you your targeted audience. Which population is your research targeted towards? Who do you want to examine? Who are the people you want to carry out your research on? These are some of the problems that research hypothesis will help you to find out. Then the last one, that is the sixth one, it's facilitate data collection, data analysis, and data interpretation. If you have a research hypothesis, a good one, it will tell you the software or the statistical inference to be used to conduct your research. It will help you in data collection. What are the methodology you are to use in collection of your data? What is the method to be used in data analysis and interpretation? Research hypothesis will give you direction to achieve this. And you know, without good data collection, good data analysis, good data interpretation, then there will be no good research. Then we go into types of hypothesis. There are basically three types of hypothesis. The first one is research hypothesis. The second one is null hypothesis. The third one and the last is testable hypothesis. So under research hypothesis is divided into about 10 or 7 categories. The first one is we have associative hypothesis, causal hypothesis, non-directional hypothesis, directional hypothesis, complex hypothesis, and simple hypothesis. Let me repeat myself again. Under research hypothesis, research is divided into 6 categories. The first one is associative hypothesis, causal hypothesis, non-directional hypothesis, directional hypothesis, complex hypothesis, and simple hypothesis. Then under null hypothesis is divided into four subcategories. The first one is simple hypothesis, complex hypothesis, causal hypothesis, and associative slash null associative null hypothesis. So the differences between research hypothesis and null hypothesis is the order in which these subheading are presented. So under research hypothesis, you can see that we started with associative hypothesis, causal hypothesis, non-directional hypothesis, directional hypothesis, complex and simple. So complex and simple are the least under research hypothesis. But in null hypothesis, simple is the first, whereby in research is the last. Then complex hypothesis is the second, while it's second to last in research hypothesis. Then associative hypothesis is the last, whereby in research hypothesis is the first on the list. Then we have the testable hypothesis. Testable hypothesis is a type of research hypothesis that try to predict the relationship between variables. In essence, between independent variable and the dependent variable. And thesis variable are testable or measurable. So in essence, the research or thesis we used to write in institution is under testable hypothesis. In some cases, whereby in some cases research is under research hypothesis. E.g. of testable hypothesis is in case you want to investigate increase in patient body temperature. Why is it that there is increase in patient's body temperature? Once there is that increase in body temperature of a patient, then it causes the patient pulse rate. So the pulse rate of the patient will also increase. So that is to say, this type of case is testable hypothesis. Why is it testable? Once one variable increases, then the other variable will also increase. That is why it's testable. It depends, one variable depends on another variable. Then we'll now take some of the subtype. We'll start with simple hypothesis. Simple hypothesis is a type of hypothesis that predict what exists, a relationship that exists between independent variable and the dependent variable. Example of this is, for example, 2 hourly position changing of a fully bedridden patient will prevent bed sore. So for a patient that is bedridden, you know, when somebody is sick and is bedridden, there is time to time they will go and change position. If they don't change position, the candidate will be affected, will have what is called bed sore. So because of that, you discover that there is dependent variable and independent variable. What is the dependent variable here? The 2 hourly position changing is independent variable, while the bed sore is which is the prevention, is the dependent variable, because it depends on 2 hour changing of the position. Once that is not done, there is no way this will take place. Then the statement shows that there exists a relationship between 2 hourly position and the bed sore prevention. So that is to say, simple hypothesis try to show the relationship between independent variable and the dependent variable, in which if the independent variable did not take place, meaning the dependent variable is not going to also take place. Then we go to complex hypothesis. In complex hypothesis, it also predicts that there exists a relationship between 2 or more independent and dependent variable. So in complex, that is why it's complex, because it deals with variables that are more than one. Once variables are more than one, then you tag it, or you name it, or you term it complex hypothesis, because you deals with 2 independent and 2 dependent variables. E.g. of independent, 3 independent and 3 dependent variable, in which you want to solve a problem, but the three problems you want to solve are independent. But the dependent solely rely on these three problems. Once these three problems are not solved, then the dependent variable is nowhere to be found. So the two relate with one another. The relationship between the two depends on one another. Without this, you can't achieve the other one. Then we go to directional hypothesis. In directional hypothesis, is a relationship that exists between dependent and independent. One thing that is common in all these type of hypotheses, all are trying to show the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. But it depends, like in the case of complex, is more than one or more than two. It can be three, it can be four, it can be five, it can be 10 variables. Then in simple is just one variable that depend on either independent or dependent variable. So in directional hypothesis, it's a relationship between is a relationship between independent and dependent. Example is high quality of nursing education will lead to high quality of nursing practice. So you can see that once there is a high quality at the school level of nursing, then what do you expect the outcome will be? The outcome will also be of the graduate of nursing from this high quality nursing education will now be those professionals that will be of high quality. So you can see the high quality of nursing education is independent, but the dependent variable here is high quality of nursing practice skills, because it depends on how the education of these professionals depends. That will now lead to high quality of the skills they will come out and exhibit. Then the non-directional. Then under non-directional is trying to show the relationship between dependent and independent variable, but does not specify the direction of the relationship. So in this case, there is no correlation between the two. That is why it's non-directional. There is no direction. It's trying as much as possible to not to say, specify the direction of the relationship. So for example, teacher-student relationship influence student learning. Teacher-student relationship influence student learning. So in this, whether there is relationship, whether there is no relationship, the good student will always perform. So whether there exists a good relationship between the teacher and student, whether it does not exist, those that are good will always get what they want. So there is not any direction to show that yes, there is actually a relationship between the teacher and student that influence the student learning. Then there is what we call the causal hypothesis. In causal hypothesis, it predicts a cause and effect. It predicts a cause and effect of a relationship or interaction between the dependent and independent variable. It's causal. In this, the relationship is causal. It's not permanent. There exists the relationship, but it's not a bond. There is no bond between the two relationships. Yes, one depends on another one. Then along the line, they are independent. Then there is what we call the null hypothesis. In null hypothesis, mostly this null hypothesis is mostly used in statistics or mathematics. It's a statistical hypothesis because the type of hypothesis is used for statistical testing and statistically interpretation. Mostly, if you hear null hypothesis, that is zero hypothesis in statistics. Once you hear null, meaning is zero in statistics. So it's mostly used in the field of statistics. Then there is associative hypothesis. In associative hypothesis, it tries to give relationship between dependent and independent variable. But in this case, because there exists, they associate with one another. One cannot play its role without the other one. In this type, there are two types. There is positive association and there is negative association. So one is leaning on the other one positively, while the other one is negatively. So anywhere you hear associative, what comes into your mind is there is positive and negative association. So we now we look at sources of hypothesis. How can we get hypothesis? Like I mentioned in the definition, it can be gotten from statement of the problem, from literature review, as well as conceptual framework. So, in essence, you can say there are two major sources of consensus, conceptual sources of hypothesis: theoretical and conceptual framework. These are the two major sources: theoretical or conceptual framework. If you can get your hypothesis from theoretical, we all know what is theory. From the word theory, there are some model. There is somebody called Royce, Roys, that hypothesized one of the sources. He has a model. We call it Royce adoption model. He tried to show the the model in which this hypothesis can be gotten or can be driven. So, in theoretical concept, it's a concept that you get from theory, from literature review. You can use it from statement of problem. These are gaps. You try to identify gaps in knowledge that you want to fill. So once you know, okay, these are the problems that exist in this research, and you want to fill it. So you are now going to get the source of your hypothesis through theoretical hypothesis. What in conceptual framework, you remember how I mentioned in conceptual framework. I said conceptual framework represent ways of thinking about a problem or a study, or ways representing how complex things work. So using this conceptual framework as the second source of hypothesis, you now have to look at, there are complex things, but you want to simplify it so that you get result. How do you simplify it? By knowing what exactly the problems are. Once you are able to know what are the problems, you have your expected result, you have your methodology clearly spelled out, you have your objectives, you have your aim, then you know you can easily do that. You can do that by different ways. Either by you try to conceptualize, to make it a reality, to make this problem a reality through your research, or through ways of thinking. Like I said, it's a set of broad ideas and principles used to structure a subsequent presentation. You are trying to make this problem, these ideas, this principle, this to structure it so that subsequently it will not be a problem. You are trying to simplify. So with this, we've come to the end of the lecture. Before we call it a day, let me summarize so that we refresh our memory. I explained what research hypotheses are. I gave four definitions. Uh, I mentioned the importance of six importance of research hypothesis. I also gave three types of research hypothesis, and I explained the subtypes under each category, as well as the sources of hypothesis, which I said are theoretical or conceptual framework, and I tried to explain what Roy's adoption model is. We call it a day. I wish you all the best. Have a lovely day. Thank you.